My dear students, we are going to talk about verbs in Old English. Well, as languages develop, not only the vocabulary changes, but also the grammatical or the structural aspects of language change. As far as English is concerned, there were a lot of transitions, modifications, and changes in terms of vocabulary and structure both. In this session, particularly focusing on the verbs, I would say that Old English verbs were very different from those that we have today. I hope that after completing this session, you will be able to understand how the verbs were used in Old English, and also you would be able to understand how these verbs were different both in nature and form from the current English. The inflection of verb in the Germanic languages is much simpler than it was in Indo-European times. A comparison of Old English verb with the verbal inflections of Greek or Latin will show how much has been lost. So basically what I'm trying to convey to you is that Greek and Latin languages had a lot more inflections, which meant a lot more variety of forms of each verb. As compared to that, Old English had comparatively lesser inflections, thus a lesser number of variety of verb forms for each verb. Old English distinguished only two simple tenses by inflection, a present and a past. And except for one word, it had no inflectional forms for the passive, as they were very much frequently present in Latin and Greek languages. A peculiar feature of the Germanic languages was the division of verb into two great classes, and I would elaborate on what were these classes and how did they operate. This main division was of weak verbs and strong verbs. Weak verbs, if you look at the screen, these weak verbs that were called weak in Old English are now called regular verbs in modern English. The second type, strong verbs, as they were called in Old English, now in modern English they are called irregular verbs. This choice of terminology of regular and irregular verbs, however, unfortunately makes certain suggestions. So, the use of this word irregular gives a kind of a connotation that strong verbs were irregular, which in a way affects their position. Further talking about strong verbs, I would give you some examples. The first example, if you look at the slide, is of the verb sing. And I'm sure you know the second and third forms of the verb sing. I have marked here on the screen, sang and sung. So these are irregular forms, which means it is not sing, singed, singed, rather it is sing, sang, sung. The irregularity that is used in making them from I to A and then to U is a feature that is important for us here. In Indo-European type, we called them because they had the power of indicating change of tense by a modification of their root vowel. As far as weak verbs are concerned, my dear students, here are the examples. The verb walk, and you can notice walked, second form, walked, third form. You can notice there is a regular pattern. Weak verbs, you already know now, are regular verbs. This change is affected by the addition of a dental, sometimes of an extra syllable. Irregularity of strong verbs means they are less in number, whereas as compared to them, regular verbs or weak verbs are more in number. I think this is very rational and very logical. When you have to have irregular verbs, of course they would have forms that are not made easily just by, for instance, adding ed, so they would be lesser in number in the language. As far as Old English is concerned, if we exclude compounds, there were only a few, over 300 of them. And even this small number falls into several classes further. Well, nowadays these verbs, generally speaking, have different vowels in the present tense, the past tense, and the past participle tense. As I assume you know that the vowel sounds have changed with the passage of time, so this change is reflected in the verbs as well. In some verbs, the vowels of the past tense and past participle are identical. Please notice on the screen the word break. This is a verb. Notice the forms broke and broken. Again, strong verb, irregular verb. In all these three forms, they have become alike in modern times in some verbs. For example, bid, bid, and bid. In Old English, the vowel of the past tense often differs in the singular and the plural. Or to be more accurate, the first and third person singular have one vowel, while the second person singular and all persons of plural have another. So, what we can say is that verbs, their nature and form was different in Old English as it is today.